Hey there, story fans! Before we start this crazy adventure, I've got a quick question for you. Have you ever had someone try to boss you around for no good reason? Drop your answer in the comments below and tell me where you're watching from today. Oh, and if you love stories that grab you and don't let go, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out. Alright, let's jump into the action. It was a bright, sunny afternoon in a cozy little place called Maple Grove. This wasn't a big city with tall buildings or noisy cars. Nope, Maple Grove was a quiet neighborhood where kids zoomed around on bikes, dogs barked happily, and neighbors smiled and waved at each other. Flowers bloomed in front yards, and the air smelled like fresh grass and lemonade. It was the kind of place where you felt safe, like nothing bad could ever happen. In the middle of this happy place lived a kid named Timmy Carter. Timmy was 12 years old, with messy brown hair that stuck out in every direction like he'd just rolled out of bed. He wasn't super tall or super short, just a regular kid with a big, bright smile that made everyone around him feel good. Timmy had dreams too, big ones. He wanted to be a skateboard pro someday, doing wild tricks and jumping ramps in front of cheering crowds. Every day after school, he'd grab his skateboard, a beat-up old thing with stickers all over it, and practice in his driveway. That sunny afternoon, Timmy was right there in his driveway working on a trick called a kickflip. A kickflip is when you make the skateboard spin in the air and land back on it, looking super cool. Timmy wasn't great at it yet, but he kept trying. His best friend Jake was with him, sitting on the grass and cheering him on. "Come on, Timmy, you almost got it that time," Jake shouted, laughing when Timmy wobbled but didn't fall. Timmy grinned, wiping sweat off his forehead. "Watch this one, Jake, it's gonna be awesome." He pushed off with his foot, the wheels of his skateboard rattling against the pavement. He bent his knees, ready to jump, when vrrum, a big, shiny truck screeched to a stop right in front of his house. The noise was so loud it made Timmy stumble, and his skateboard skidded out from under him, clattering to the ground. Timmy and Jake looked up, their eyes wide. Two men climbed out of the truck, and they didn't look friendly at all. They were tall and wore dark uniforms with shiny badges pinned to their chests. The badges sparkled in the sunlight, making them look important, like real cops. But something about them felt wrong. Their uniforms didn't fit quite right, like they'd borrowed them from someone else. And their faces, they had mean smiles, the kind that make your stomach twist. The taller man had a buzz cut so short you could see his scalp, and his eyes were squinty, like he was always mad. The shorter one had a loud voice and a big, fake grin that showed too many teeth. They called themselves the HOA security team. Now, if you don't know what an HOA is, it's short for Homeowners Association. A group of grown-ups who make rules for a neighborhood, like don't paint your house purple or keep your grass neat. But here's the thing, Maple Grove's HOA was just a bunch of nice old ladies who mostly cared about planting flowers. They didn't have a security team. Nobody in Maple Grove had ever seen these guys before. The tall man with the buzz cut stepped forward, his boots thumping on the driveway. "Skateboarding against the rules, kid," he said, his voice low and mean. He pointed at Timmy's skateboard like it was something bad, like a bag of stolen candy. His smile wasn't a happy one, it was more like a wolf showing its teeth. Now Timmy froze, his heart thumping loud in his chest. He wasn't used to grown-ups talking to him like that. I'm just in my driveway, he said, his voice small. He glanced at Jake, hoping his friend would say something, but Jake looked just as scared, his eyes big as saucers. The shorter man laughed, a loud, barking sound that echoed down the street. Your driveway, huh? Don't matter, we make the rules around here. He crossed his arms, his badge glinting like it was laughing at Timmy, too. You're breaking the law, kid. Time to pay up. Now Timmy didn't know what to say. Pay up for what? He was just playing, having fun like he always did. He looked around, hoping a neighbor would come out and tell these guys to leave. But the street was quiet. Curtains twitched in a few windows like people were watching, but nobody opened their doors. It was just Timmy, Jake, and these two scary men. The tall man took another step closer, so close Timmy could smell his stinky breath like old coffee and something sour. Hand over that board, he said, pointing at Timmy's skateboard. It's evidence. Now Timmy's stomach dropped. His skateboard wasn't just a toy, it was his favorite thing in the whole world. He'd saved up his allowance for months to buy it, even though it was second-hand and scratched up. It had a cool dragon sticker on the bottom, one he'd put there himself. Giving it up felt like giving away a piece of his heart. But it's mine, Timmy said, his voice shaking. He bent down to pick up his skateboard, hugging it tight to his chest. Jake stood up, looking like he wanted to help but not sure how. You can't just take it, Timmy added, trying to sound brave. The shorter man's grin got even bigger, but it wasn't a nice smile. Oh, we can do whatever we want, he said. He reached out, quick as a snake, and grabbed the skateboard right out of Timmy's hands. Timmy tried to hold on, but the man was too strong. He yanked it away, tossing it into the back of their truck like it was trash. Now Timmy felt tears sting his eyes, but he blinked them back. He didn't want these guys to see him cry. Why are you doing this? He asked, his voice cracking. I didn't do anything wrong. The tall man leaned down, his face so close Timmy could see the tiny red veins in his eyes. Listen, kid, he whispered, his voice cold as ice. We're in charge now. You better learn that quick or things'll get worse. He straightened up, dusting off his hands like he'd just finished a job. Now Timmy's knees felt wobbly, like they might give out. He wasn't sure what worse meant, but it sounded bad, really bad. Jake finally spoke up, his voice squeaky. You guys aren't real cops, are you? He asked, taking a tiny step forward. The shorter man laughed again, so loud it made Timmy jump. Cops, security, whatever, we're the ones who matter. Now scram, both of you, before we decide to teach you another lesson. Now Timmy wanted to argue, to demand his skateboard back, but his throat felt tight, like the words were stuck. He looked at Jake, who shook his head just a little, like he was saying, "Don't do it, Timmy." The two men climbed back into their truck, slamming the doors. The engine roared and they peeled out, tires squealing as they sped down the street. Timmy stood there staring at the empty spot where his skateboard used to be. His hands were shaking and his chest felt heavy, like someone had dropped a big rock on it. Jake put a hand on his shoulder. "You okay, man?" he asked quietly. Timmy didn't answer right away. He felt like he wasn't okay at all, but he didn't want to say it out loud. "I gotta tell my grandpa," he said finally, turning toward his house. His voice was soft, almost a whisper. Now Timmy's grandpa wasn't like most grandpas. His name was Joe Carter, but everyone just called him Grandpa Joe. He didn't spend his days knitting scarves or watching old TV shows. Grandpa Joe was tough, not loud tough, like the guys in movies who yell and punch walls, but quiet tough, like a tree that stands strong no matter how hard the wind blows. He'd been a soldier a long time ago, and not just any soldier. He was an interrogator, which means he was really good at figuring people out, asking questions, and spotting lies. Timmy didn't know all the details. Grandpa Joe didn't talk much about his past, but he knew one thing: his grandpa wasn't someone you messed with. As Timmy walked up the porch steps, his sneakers dragging, he felt a tiny spark of hope. Maybe Grandpa Joe would know what to do. Maybe he could fix this. Timmy pushed open the front door, calling out, "Grandpa, you home?" The house smelled like coffee and warm cookies. Grandpa Joe always had a pot brewing and a plate of snacks ready. Timmy found him in the kitchen, sitting at the table with a newspaper. Grandpa Joe looked up, his gray eyes sharp behind his glasses. "What's wrong, Timmy?" he asked right away, like he could tell something bad had happened just by looking at him. Timmy took a deep breath and started talking. He told Grandpa Joe everything about the truck, the fake cops, the mean things they said, and how they stole his skateboard. His voice got shaky when he got to the part about them threatening to make things worse. By the time he finished, his hands were clenched into fists and he was trying hard not to cry. Grandpa Joe didn't say anything for a moment. He just leaned back in his chair, his face calm but his eyes narrowing like he was thinking hard. Finally, he nodded. "All right, son," he said, his voice steady. "Let's figure this out." Timmy didn't know it yet, but those fake HOA cops had just made a big mistake. They thought they could scare a kid and get away with it. They didn't know about Grandpa Joe, and they definitely didn't know what was coming next. So what would you do if someone tried to scare you like that? Stick around, because this story about to get wild. Hey, story fans, you're not gonna believe what happens next, so stay with me. Quick question: have you ever seen someone being unfair and wished you could stop them? Drop your thoughts in the comments and let's keep this adventure rolling. Those two mean guys, let's call them Buzz and Spike, weren't at Timmy's house to chat or be nice. Oh no, they were trouble with a capital T. Buzz was the tall one, with a super short buzz cut that made his head look shiny under the sun. His eyes were all squinty, like he was always mad at the world. He didn't even ask questions. He just stomped over, snatched Timmy's skateboard right off the ground, and threw it into the back of their big, shiny truck. Clunk. The sound made Timmy's stomach hurt, like part of him got tossed away too. Spike, the shorter guy, was even worse. He wasn't tall like Buzz, but he was loud, super loud, like a dog barking right in your ear. He stepped so close to Timmy that Timmy could see the dirt on his fake badge. "You're breaking HOA rules, brat," Spike shouted, his voice booming across the driveway. "Time to learn a lesson, kid." Timmy's heart was pounding so hard it felt like it might jump out of his chest. He wasn't trying to break any rules, he was just a kid, playing in his own driveway, having fun like always. I'm just in my driveway," he said, his voice all shaky. He hoped maybe Spike would listen, maybe say, "Oh, my bad," and leave him alone. But Spike wasn't that kind of guy. Instead, Spike's face got red and he leaned even closer, his breath smelling like old gum. Before Timmy could move, Spike grabbed Timmy's hand hard. He twisted Timmy's fingers, squeezing them like he was trying to break a stick. Crack! A sharp pain shot through Timmy's hand, like someone had slammed it with a hammer. Timmy yelped, a loud cry that echoed down the quiet street. Tears filled his eyes, making everything blurry. He looked down, and two of his fingers were bent all wrong, sticking out at a weird angle that made his stomach flip. Buzz, standing by the truck, didn't help. He didn't tell Spike to stop. He just laughed, a mean, ugly laugh that made Timmy feel small and scared. "Next time we won't be so nice," Buzz said, his voice cold as ice. He climbed into the truck, slamming the door so loud it made Timmy jump. Spike gave Timmy one last glare, like he was daring him to say something, then hopped in too. The truck roared to life and sped off, tires screeching, leaving Timmy standing there alone and hurting. All around Maple Grove, neighbors were watching. Timmy saw curtains move in windows, little flashes of faces peeking out, but nobody came outside. Nobody yelled, "Hey, leave that kid alone," or ran over to help. It was like everyone was too scared, or maybe they just didn't care. Timmy's best friend Jake was still there, but he looked pale, his eyes big and worried. "Timmy, you okay?" Jake whispered, but Timmy couldn't answer. His hand hurt so bad, and his heart hurt even worse. Clutching his hand to his chest, Timmy ran toward his house. Every step made his fingers throb, and he bit his lip to keep from crying. He didn't want to cry, not where Buzz and Spike might see him, not where the neighbors might be watching. He pushed open the front door, his sneakers squeaking on the floor. "Grandpa," he called, his voice all wobbly. "Grandpa, are you here?" Timmy's mom was at work, probably at the diner across town, serving pancakes and coffee to truck drivers. She wouldn't be home for hours, but Grandpa Joe, he was always around, and Timmy needed him now more than ever. Grandpa Joe wasn't like most grandpas who just sat on the porch, sipping tea and talking about the weather. No way. Grandpa Joe was different, special even. He was old, sure, with gray hair and wrinkles around his eyes, but he was strong in a quiet way, like a superhero hiding in plain sight. A long time ago, Grandpa Joe had been a soldier, not the kind who ran into battles with a gun, but the kind who asked questions. He was called an interrogator, which is a big word that means he was really good at figuring out what people were hiding. He could look at someone and know if they were lying just by the way they blinked or shifted their feet. He knew about fear, about bravery, about making things right. Timmy didn't understand all of it, but he knew one thing. Grandpa Joe wasn't someone you messed with. Timmy found Grandpa Joe in the living room, sitting in his favorite chair with a cup of coffee. The room smelled warm like cookies and wood polish. Grandpa Joe looked up from his newspaper, his glasses perched on his nose. The second he saw Timmy, his smile disappeared. "Timmy, what's wrong?" he asked, his voice gentle but serious. He put the paper down and leaned forward like he was ready to jump up and fix everything. Now Timmy held out his hand, the one with the bent fingers. It hurt so much he could barely talk. These guys," he started, his voice breaking. Tears were coming now and he couldn't stop them. "They said they were HOA security. They took my skateboard and they hurt me." Grandpa Joe's eyes went to Timmy's hand and his face changed. He didn't look mad, not like Spike or Buzz. He looked calm, too calm, like the sky before a big storm. He stood up, slow and steady, and knelt down so he was eye to eye with Timmy. "Tell me everything, son," he said. His voice was soft, but it had a sharp edge, like a knife hiding under a blanket. Timmy sat on the couch, his hand cradled in his lap. He told Grandpa Joe the whole story about Buzz and Spike showing up, about their fake badges and mean words, about how they stole his skateboard and twisted his fingers until they broke. He told him how nobody helped, how the neighbors just watched, how scared he felt. By the time he finished, his cheeks were wet, but he didn't care anymore. He just wanted Grandpa Joe to make it better. Grandpa Joe listened without saying a word. He didn't interrupt, didn't ask questions, just nodded now and then. When Timmy was done, Grandpa Joe leaned back, his hands resting on his knees. For a second, he didn't move, like he was thinking hard about something big. Then out of nowhere, he smiled. It wasn't a big, happy smile like when he gave Timmy ice cream. It was a small, quiet smile, the kind that made Timmy feel safe but also a little nervous. Don't you worry, Timmy," Grandpa Joe said, his voice low and steady. "We're gonna take care of this." Timmy blinked, wiping his eyes. "What do you mean, Grandpa?" he asked. His fingers still hurt and he felt so tired, like he'd run 100 miles. But something about Grandpa Joe's smile made him think maybe things weren't as bad as they seemed. Grandpa Joe stood up and patted Timmy's shoulder. "Just trust me, son," he said. "Nobody hurts my family and gets away with it." Timmy didn't know what Grandpa Joe was planning, but he felt a tiny bit better, like a weight had lifted off his chest. Buzz and Spike thought they could scare a kid and walk away laughing. They thought they were tough, in charge, untouchable. But they didn't know about Grandpa Joe. They didn't know what was coming. Hey there, story fans, you're gonna love where this is going, so don't go anywhere. Quick question for you. Have you ever seen someone plan something super smart to catch a bully? Drop your answer in the comments and tell me where you're watching from. Alright, let's dive back into Timmy's adventure. After those mean guys, Buzz and Spike, hurt Timmy's hand, things felt different in Maple Grove. Timmy wasn't the same happy kid zooming around on his skateboard. Nope, he stayed inside his house, sitting on the couch or hiding in his room. His hand was wrapped in a big clunky splint, a white bandage thing that kept his broken fingers still. Every time he moved, his fingers hurt, like little lightning bolts zapping him. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was being scared. Timmy kept looking out the window, worried that Buzz and Spike's big truck would roll up again. What if they came back? What if they were even meaner this time? Timmy's best friend Jake stopped by to cheer him up. "Wanna play video games?" Jake asked, holding up a controller, but Timmy just shook his head. "What if those guys see me?" he whispered. Jake didn't know what to say, so he just sat there looking sad. Maple Grove used to feel safe, like a big hug from the whole neighborhood. Now it felt like a place where bad things could happen, and that made Timmy's stomach twist. But while Timmy was scared, Grandpa Joe, oh, he was busy, super busy. He didn't act scared or mad, not like most people would. He was calm, like a lake with no ripples. Every morning he'd sit at the kitchen table, sipping his coffee from a big blue mug. He'd look out the window, watching the street like a hawk watching for a mouse. Sometimes he'd mutter to himself real quiet so Timmy could barely hear. "Patience, Timmy, patience," he'd say, his voice soft but strong. Timmy didn't know what that meant, but it sounded important, like Grandpa Joe had a secret plan. See, Grandpa Joe wasn't the kind of guy to yell or stomp around when he was upset. He didn't make a big fuss or call a million people to complain. Nope, he was a planner, like someone putting together a puzzle one piece at a time. He moved slow, thought hard, and watched everything. And that's exactly what he started doing in Maple Grove. One day, Grandpa Joe put on his old brown hat, the one he wore when he mowed the lawn, and went for a walk. He didn't tell Timmy where he was going, just said, "I'll be back soon, son." Timmy watched from the window as Grandpa Joe strolled down the street, hands in his pockets, looking like any old guy enjoying the sunshine. But Timmy knew better. Grandpa Joe wasn't just walking, he was on a mission. Grandpa Joe stopped at Mrs. Wilson's house first. She was a nice lady who always gave Timmy cookies when he rode his bike past. Grandpa Joe knocked on her door, and when she answered, he smiled real polite. "Afternoon, Mrs. Wilson," he said. "You ever hear of an HOA security team around here?" His voice was casual, like he was asking about the weather. Mrs. Wilson frowned, her eyebrows scrunching up. "Security team? No, Joe, never heard of such a thing. Our HOA's just me and a few others, and we don't have badges or trucks." She shook her head, confused. Grandpa Joe nodded like he'd expected that answer and thanked her before walking to the next house. He went to Mr. Patel's place, then to the Garcias, then to old Mr. Thompson, who always sat on his porch with a lemonade. Every time he asked the same question, "You know anything about these HOA cops?" And every time the neighbors said the same thing, "Nope, never seen 'em before." Some looked worried, like they'd heard about Timmy getting hurt. Others looked mad, saying, "Who do these guys think they are?" But nobody knew who Buzz and Spike really were. Now Timmy didn't see all this, but Grandpa Joe told him bits and pieces at dinner. "Sounds like those fellas aren't who they say," Grandpa Joe said, cutting his chicken with a fork. His eyes twinkled like he was figuring out a secret. Timmy's heart beat a little faster. "You mean they're not real cops?" he asked. Grandpa Joe just smiled, a small, sneaky smile. "Let's just say they're not what they seem," he said, and went back to eating. Timmy wanted to ask more, but he knew Grandpa Joe wouldn't spill everything, not yet. A couple of days later, something big happened. It was evening and the sky was turning pink and orange like a giant painting. Timmy was in the living room trying to draw with his good hand when Grandpa Joe came home from another walk. His face looked serious, but his eyes were bright like he'd found a clue. Timmy didn't ask questions. He'd learned Grandpa Joe would tell him when he was ready. That night, Grandpa Joe didn't go straight to bed. Instead, he grabbed his jacket and headed out again, telling Timmy, "Stay inside, son, I'm just checking on something." Timmy peeked through the curtains as Grandpa Joe walked to the edge of Maple Grove where the street met a big field. It was dark, but Timmy could just make out a shape in the shadows, a big, shiny truck parked all alone. Grandpa Joe didn't get too close. He stood far away, hiding behind a tree, and watched. Inside the truck, Buzz and Spike were sitting there, their faces lit up by the glow of a phone. They were counting money, stacks of dollar bills, all crumpled and messy. Buzz held up a handful and laughed, his voice carrying through the quiet night. "That stupid kid with the skateboard," he said, snickering. "Thought he could talk back to us." Spike laughed too, loud and mean. "Easy money," he said, stuffing bills into a bag. "These people don't even check if we're real." Grandpa Joe's hands tightened into fists and his jaw got all stiff like he was biting down hard. Timmy couldn't see his face from the house, but he knew that look. It was the same look Grandpa Joe got when someone cheated at cards or lied to his face. Buzz and Spike weren't just bullies, they were fakes, pretending to be security to scare people and take their money. They'd hurt Timmy for fun, and now they were laughing about it, thinking they'd gotten away with it. But Grandpa Joe didn't do anything right then. He didn't march over and yell, didn't bang on their truck. He just watched, quiet as a shadow, then turned and walked back home. When he came inside, Timmy was waiting, his eyes big. "Did you see something, Grandpa?" he asked. Grandpa Joe didn't answer right away. He hung up his jacket, slow and careful, then looked at Timmy. "Just some folks who need to learn a lesson," he said, his voice low. Timmy shivered, but not because he was cold. Something big was coming, he could feel it. The next morning, Timmy woke up to a funny noise, clunk, clunk, clunk. He ran to the living room and saw Grandpa Joe messing with an old camera, the kind that looked like it belonged in a museum. It was big and clunky, with buttons and a little screen. Grandpa Joe was setting it up by the front window, pointing it toward the street. "What's that for, Grandpa?" Timmy asked, tilting his head. Grandpa Joe winked, his eyes sparkling like he had a secret. "Just in case," he said. That was all he'd say, but there was something in his voice, a strength, a promise. Timmy didn't know what the camera was for, but he knew one thing: Grandpa Joe wasn't scared of Buzz and Spike. Not even a little. Hey, story fans, get ready because this part is wild. Before we dive in, I've got a question. Have you ever seen someone stand up